Yay! Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mastering the Drop, a real view of recovery, where myself and my esteemed guests all come in just to share and have an organic conversation with you about a, one part of a recovery journey or another. And today is a very special topic, although I know I say that every single week, but they all are. Yeah. But today, we're focusing on reducing our vulnerability, and especially when it comes to our vulnerability to negative emotions. And as you all know, my name is Trisha Peridot. I am the owner, creator, master coach with Turning Leafs Recovery, Life, and Wellness Coaching. And my esteemed guest today is Robin Clare. And I'm going to let Robin introduce herself because you know what? It's just better. It's just better that way. Robin, hello. Thank you so much for being here. Please,
Trisha, thank you.
Where do you come to us from?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I come from Connecticut, and I am also a podcaster. I have a podcast called Hungry for Answers from Recovery to Your Ultimate Life, which Trisha was a wonderful guest on. And during the day, I am a writing coach for folks who are in recovery from whatever they're in recovery from, and they want to write a book about it. So I spend most of my time doing that as a recovery coach. I'm also an author. I've written 4 books, including Feast and Famine, Healing Addiction with Grace. And that was around my own journey of recovery from 40 years of obsessive compulsive food disorder and bulimia. And so I wrote this spiritually based book about using spirituality to enhance your recovery. And I am also a speaker, and that's what I do. I'm really all about healing suffering. So this is a great topic for me to be on. Actually just wrote a new presentation called The Number One Silent Addiction in the World. And to me, that's suffering. And that we're always sending out SOSs to our family and friends. The silence of suffering is what the SOS stands for. We're always struggling, and we're vulnerable to negative emotions for sure. So thank you for having me.
Oh, I knew this was going to be the best week for you to be on. And it happens so synergistically, or so, I don't know, like we didn't plan it to be the week that you came on. It was the week that worked well for you. And it just happened that way, that this is the topic of conversation for the whole week. Right. And here you are, and on a special day. And I thank you for being flexible with that, because I know I changed it on you. But you know what? We all have to, be willing to be flexible in life. And I think that, having that flexibility really offers us, the opportunity to grow and to expand our consciousness, but also heal from even that type of vulnerability, that stressor, that if things don't go just so and don't happen the exact way that I designed them, then I get into the space of negativity and emotional reactivity, et cetera, et cetera. I know we can come up with a gazillion different examples of negative emotions. And we were having a conversation before we got on here, and I love this because in some of the writing that I've done for this week, I even highlighted exactly what you said, which is, we have to know what these emotions are. We have to be able to call them out, and we have to know why we're experiencing them in a negative fashion, how we could maybe experience them differently. But I love the idea or the concept of looking at some of these negative emotions are not necessarily negative. Sometimes they're negative emotions, but they have a positive effect in our life. And, right. And we have to be willing to pull that out and draw that out and embrace it. But I'd love for everybody to hear your stance on that, because it was just so well said. That sometimes
So
Yes.
negative emotions, right? Anger, jealousy, grief, sadness. If you haven't experienced any of those over the last couple of years, then you're probably living under a rock, right? But we've all lived them, and we live them every day, and there's really nothing wrong with them unless we don't do something with them. So, and then they become repetitive. So what I was thinking is that I think negative emotions are one of the keys to well-being, because if you know you're feeling a negative emotion, and if you can actually sit with that, it's pretty amazing how quickly the angst about it will start to subside. And information will come to you about why you're so angry or why are you sad. And then you're able to take that information and make a plan to change your life. But if you try to ignore them, or use a substance or some other vice to take them away, you're not going to get the type of healing that's required in order to live an abundant and joyful life. So you can't ignore negative emotions. They're when they come up in my life, because I've lived such an examined life through therapy and spirituality and coaching, that when they come up for me, I'm kind of weird. I'm like, ooh, what's that? Like I can actually notice it. I notice the negative emotion. I'm like, why is that here? What am I feeling? What is going on? Where's that? Where am I being vulnerable in my own being that I'm feeling that?
Very, very poignant. And I just want to push. I love all of that. So if I can, for the listeners who are clients, so for my folks that I'm working with, you guys, when you're listening in and you're hearing what Robin is saying, if you go back to some of your earlier modules, depending upon where you are, this is how we move through this is what we call the core non-physical feeling check-in. So go back to that, pull it out if you don't already have, that printed out for you, tangible, so you can touch, feel, because that core non-physical feeling is how we can sit in and move through this. So it's right here, right now, in this moment, I feel irritated, agitated, frustrated, bothered, annoyed. Yeah. Insert your own adjective. And what's driving that? How much of this is about me or for me, and how much of it is actually coming to me from an external or an outside source? So be pulling in your internal and external locus of control and be looking at where that falls. And then you can say, right here, right now, in this moment, going forward, how can I improve this? Or, right. What shifts do I need to make? How would I prefer to hear it? What filter do I need to be hearing this through? What lens do I want to be looking at this through? And how can I use this to grow, change, shift, morph into the direction of how I truly want to see myself experiencing living in all things? Because it's not about just shifting into this like positive lifestyle. People, comment to me a lot, like, you're just so positive all the time. Doesn't mean I don't have negative emotions. Doesn't mean I don't have to sit through negative things. It means I've conditioned myself to sit in them and move through them. And over time, it has become quite rapid that it happens for me. And it's almost seamless and unnoticeable to other people.
So one of these negative emotions is fear. And fear to me is a sure sign that you're in your head and not in your body, because the mind is gives us fear so that it can protect us. Mm-hmm. And so when you're feeling fear, it's not a negative thing. You should step back and say, why am I feeling fear? Why is this fear? What is this fear protecting me from? And what do I need to do to get enough information about this, or say no to it, whatever the situation is, or say yes, but So by recognizing the fear, you can say, I get something is delaying me from saying yes to this. And so I need to do a little bit more research. So if we take a look at the negative emotions, like fear is a big one, fear of the past, fear of what happened to you in the past, fear, regret of the past versus fear of the future. Most likely, if you're in fear, you're not really grounded in the present moment. So there are all these spiritual concepts that we've heard over and over again, but they really have a place when we're talking about these negative emotions, because it's all about being present, grounded in your body, doing what truly matters to you. And when you're doing that in the present, grounded, mattered, you're not going to be afraid. And if you are afraid, it's typically because you're not, there's some elements of it that you need more information on to feel confident.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we try too hard, too frequently to avoid uncomfortable, fearful, whatever, right? The fear is uncomfortable. We try to avoid that. We try to hide from it. I don't know. I can't get on that airplane, because I'm future tripping about, the what ifs may or may not happen. And I'm looking at all those statistics, we're too quick to just avoid it altogether. Like, I can't do that. And so then we go into the I can'ts, and it's not an I can't, it's an I won't. Or, because we all can do a lot of things that we're fearful of. We can do most things that we're fearful of. And, and that's not to discount, okay, because I never want to discount true, mental health issues that people do,
Sure.
struggle with in battle. But I'm here to tell you, as somebody that had significant, severe generalized anxiety disorder with panic, literally at one point in my life, I would sit on the floorboard of the truck when we would be, driving somewhere, because the input was too overbearing for my fear receptors in my brain. Right. So, then my physical body would get really uncomfortable, but, we can learn very practical, or we can learn skill sets and tactics along with the practical application of them in our lives that will allow us, and I'm living proof of that, allow us to not have to exist that way at that extreme any longer. Sure, I still get, little waves of it. And sometimes I don't quite catch it in time. We'll be driving down the freeway and I'm passengering and I might go like that, but it's a far cry from what it used to look like,
Yes.
Oh my gosh, like fear, holding on, those kinds of things. But then, there are other times, like, going on crazy adventures in a, off-roading vehicle that, made it through, but would never do again. Yeah, just because it was just that uncomfortable. But we can learn that it's, it's not necessarily a fear of death. It can just be something that is just not stimulating it from a stimulation standpoint, doesn't work well for us. And there's all kinds of ways to do it. You just have to be willing to take the journey to learn what you need to do for you. It's not 100% the same for everybody of how you learn to sit in and move through the uncomfortable. It's not going to be the same for everybody how you learn to restructure the negative emotions. Everybody's going to have a different spin or need a deeper level here and a lesser level there. But you have to be willing to take the journey.
Yeah. And in working with my mentor, so that I stay sober, food sober, she's really what I had shared with you before the show that I have two elder parents now that I'm deeply involved in their care. And she's like, how are you doing? Are you staying sober? Because there's it's hard. It's, there's grief, there's sadness, there's all these different things going on, it's exhaustion. And so she said to me, "How are you doing?" And I did notice that since the last time I was with them, I'm having a difficult time controlling what I'm eating. I'm more obsessively eating. And so I was able to recognize that the negative emotions that I was feeling are having an impact on my recovery. So I think it's really important that we have tricks, things to get us out of a spiral, that negative emotions can take us down a spiral. And thank goodness I have a wonderful mentor who asked me the question so that I could recognize that I'm spiraling, not as I would have in the past, as you described, like, in the past, it would have been 3 giant bags of M&Ms, right? Right now, it might be an extra couple of pretzels, but it's still, for me, it's more. And so I have tools in place. If I don't track my food on a daily basis, doesn't mean I can't eat what I want, but I have to track that I had cookies or whatever, or an apple sure would be less carbs than a cookie and it's better for me. So I have tricks, ways to not become vulnerable to those negative emotions that are very apparent in my life right now.
Yes. And I love that you brought, your journey with food to the table. Because we do a lot of work in this realm, right? And we call it, food addiction, but it can be like our relationship with food has a journey that it has to go on. And I'm also, somebody that has worked on this for a significant period of my life. I think I'm at 27 years now in recovery from anorexia, high restricting body dysmorphia. But then you also couple in there, like sugar addiction, and not just, refined sugars, but, bread and, just a lot of things that convert, and all of those comfort foods that, there would be that indulgence and then the restricting, and the indulgence and then the restricting. And so we do a lot of work on this here in at TLR, but, it's really about that relationship, right? That we have to, again, take a look at what emotional purpose am I giving to things outside of me? How much am I relying on, say, food in this case, to bring me peace, joy, comfort, relief, whatever? And if I'm doing it mindlessly, why am I so detached from my subconscious and its needs? And how can I, change my relationship with food in a sense that it doesn't hold an emotional purpose, that it's genuinely just fuel for my body. And that, for me, keeps me out of that emotional space of eating. Sure, I say to myself every once in a while, like, I feel like something I feel, I start that craving process. I don't even like to call it craving, but it's like, I want something. So I have to ask myself, is there an emotional purpose as to why I feel like I want to, I don't know, make a small batch of cookies or something like that? And if I find that emotional purpose, then I have to sit with that for a while and figure out whether A, I'm going to allow myself to have that emotional purpose, or B, if I'm not going to allow myself to eat that for that emotional purpose. Because I'm at a place at 27 years where I can say, you know what? It's okay if I feel like a comfort bowl of mac and cheese. Like, it's okay for me, because if I go into it knowingly, open eyes, honestly, genuinely, and transparently, it's not going to prompt that spiral of it continuing. I can have that for just that one day in that one space for that one sitting, and then have it be over. Not everybody can. And I think that's one of the things that makes food such a bigger journey, because we can't, simply put it down like we can alcohol, like we can controlled substances. We need it.
We have
to live. We have to eat.
here's a good example even today. So I had a very healthy lunch. And then I said to myself, well, maybe I'll order dessert on Uber Eats. And I went to open the app and I said, you know what, Robin, talking to myself, go do something else, right? And if in a half hour you really still want this dessert, order it. So I sort of just said, let's delay the gratification here. And I didn't even actually remember it until I just told you the story. Like my afternoon went on and I was like, oh, wait, I never ordered that dessert, which for me, I didn't really want it. I think there was just something I felt was missing, or we're so, we grew up in a house where we had dinner and then we had dessert. We had lunch and then we had a cookie. Right? Like there was always dessert following something. If something happy happened, we had dessert. If there was something sad, we had dessert. Company coming, dessert, right? Like it's like dessert was just the way we celebrated and placated our lives. And so something was emotional for me. I didn't take the time. I just said, you know what, I'm going to come back to that. Let's come back to that. And I guess whatever I did next, I'm just trying to think. I think I watched an episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and just laughed. So I needed to laugh. Like what's that?
That was an effective distraction, right? Going and watching something that was funny, that was, dopamine inducing, right? Like elevate the chemical reactions going on in our brain. And just doing something else. So that's, effective distraction and an effective self-soothing tactic. So I'm just tying it in so that my people hear me telling them where to go find it and
where to look
in their work. But this is it, right? Like sometimes we have to do a little internal negotiation. We have to have those limits and limitations, and we have to say, like, okay, right? I'm not saying I can't have it because we don't want to go through life feeling punished and restricted all the time.
Right.
I had dessert last week on Wednesday with a friend at lunch, and because I really enjoy having dessert that's been made by a chef. It's just a thing. I really love it because they're always, super good. And we shared it. So it wasn't even that, I ate the whole dessert. We shared it, but, I got to pay the price for it, not emotionally, because it wasn't an emotional thing. It was like, you know what, we do this like once a quarter, like whoop-de-dee, like we can have a dessert. But it was not making wiser choices about which dessert I chose, because I chose one that had several ingredients in it that trigger inflammation response inside my body. And for me, because I have a very slow moving system. So it took me until this morning to feel completely over the after effects of the meal / dessert on Wednesday. And I did divide the meal in half. So I ate half of it on Wednesday and half of it on Thursday. Or was it Thursday, Friday? I think we went to lunch on Thursday. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But, but it still took me from Thursday, Friday,
a long time.
Tuesday morning. Well, for me, it's generally 4 days, but I know that about my body. So then if I know that going in psychologically, the next 4 days of discomfort, I'm not going into that space where when I look in the mirror, the dysmorphic visions come in and things like that. But you have to be willing, again, to step into that journey.
Yes.
And know that, this whole process that I'm doing has to be filled with intention, purpose, productive, proactive skill sets, tactics, and the practical application thereof if I want to be successful. So I have to also then, after that, like myself, like you, be willing to not allow ourselves to, too much complacency. Because complacency will take you out.
Oh, yeah. 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 Complacency will keep you in the cycle of what you're doing, right? And doesn't it doesn't, I'm just trying to think, is complacency being in the past? Are you stuck in the past?
More about going back to past behaviors.
Yes.
It's generally where it ends us up. So when, when I meet with a client, say, they reach out, I think I need a tune up, whatever. We have our complacency check-ins, schedule. And it's generally about every 3 weeks after they've completed a program with me.
Yeah.
And it's to identify, because they'll be like, this just isn't feeling right to me, or that isn't feeling right to me, or this prompted, irritability in me, and yada, yada. So we start to look at, where are we complacent? What skill sets or tools that were previously working well for us and providing effectiveness have we stopped utilizing? Have we stopped looking at? Have we stopped, what have we put down for a while? And that might be like, if somebody stops journaling what they eat, all of a sudden, I don't know how this got out of control. Well, are you keeping track? Are you, are you doing your food mood inventory? Are you, these different things? Are you watching your post-acute withdrawal cycle, right? For people that are in their first 2 years of a chemical addiction recovery, are you watching your post-acute withdrawal cycle? Because if you're not watching the cycle, how are you supposed to know when it's coming? And then how can you be prepared for it? Just a different, so the complacency is about, maybe you aren't going back to old behavior, but you're not using the ones that helped you get to a place where you felt success, comfortable, confident, whatever. So once we get, and this happens a lot, we get to where oh, life is going good. I'm not feeling cravings. I'm not feeling triggered. I'm not feeling prompted. I'm not all of these things. And I'm genuinely happy in the way I'm living life. And so we just start to get on this autopilot. And then in that autopilot, only the strongest of our tactics stick around, right? Because it's a conditioned way of being. So subconsciously, how we grew up with our relationship with food is what's going to be stronger. It's going to be more embedded, because it's 30, 40, 50 years embedded, or, even just 10 years embedded. It takes a while to condition that new behavior. So if we're, and I say this a lot, because, recovery's you go to treatment, it's 30 days. 30 days is not undoing 30 years of conditioned way of being. It's going to give you a respite and provide some stability. It's gonna, now you got to do the work to condition the new way of being. And that's not even going to happen in just a year. A year will give you a higher propensity of success, 2 years, even more, and 3 years. I eat, sleep, breathe every way, everything that I learned along the way in getting sober and in my recovery journey. I eat, sleep, breathe it. And I know when I get complacent, because I get short tempered, my fuse gets shorter. I'm more easily upset. And I just feel differently. I feel things differently. I experience things differently. And then I can look and I can usually find where it is that I've gotten complacent with what works well for me.
I know I'm not supposed to be asking questions because it's your podcast.
No, you can. This is just a conversation.
What triggers complacency though, Trisha? Because we could be going really well.
Confidence. There's complacency. Right?
Lack of confidence?
No, I don't think it's a lack of confidence at all. I think it's that it's when we step into that place of, I'm good, right? I'm good. I don't need to work on this anymore. I'm good. I've arrived where I'm happy right where I'm at. Yeah. And then we stop. We stop engaging in it. We stop self-observing. We stop paying attention, and we stop, seeking more growth. We stop, so we get confident with where we are. We get satisfied with where we are. We get busy. We allow ourselves to get busy with work, and we don't, we're not putting ourselves in first position. We're not making sure we're doing our intention setting in the morning. We're not checking in with ourselves every 2 hours to see how, we are emotionally, and we start filling that bag again. And then we get done at the end of the day. And maybe now we're not even doing our night hygiene anymore. We're not unpacking the bag and looking at what went well today and why. What didn't go as well as I'd hoped and what didn't work. If we're not doing those things that keep us from being overloaded, we're naturally going to slide. Well, I'm not even going to say we're going to slide backwards, because there's no do-overs. So I don't even like the word relapse. It's, where it can just be an episode of using, or, overeating, or, binge shopping, or whatever it is. If we step into a space where we, move into that type of coping.
Yeah.
It's not it's just a conditioned way that had more strength, is deeper embedded into our memory banks as a way that used to work. And we just don't catch ourselves, and we just don't, like you said, I noticed that I was eating a little more pretzels than usual. Mm-hmm. Right. But you only notice because you have a system and a process that you're not willing to put down, because if you put it down, what could happen. And what, then if you put it down, you'll get complacent. Yes. On being mindful about what you put in your body. So it's really that, this confidence that we allow ourselves to step into, that we're good. We don't need to track anymore. We don't need to log, and we don't need to pay attention. We don't need to observe. I don't need those things anymore. I'm all good. But the minute I say that, I'm going to say, I'm all good. I can have one glass of wine, and that's going to end poorly for me, because I proved that to myself over and over again for 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yes. I agree. So the vulnerability, I think, happens when, as you said, when we become too confident that we got this. And I'm not sure we ever get this. I think life is about really taking care of yourself on all levels: mind, body, spirit, and emotion. Sorry.
You're fine.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. The mind body connection, and I was having a conversation with somebody a little bit ago, who I just thoroughly enjoyed every minute of. Anyway, our mind is part of our body, right? And so, the whole connection there is, it's a system. It's there for a reason. Mm-hmm. So when we feel things in our gut, it's really a communication process inside of our body that, again, is there to tell us something. And so I think that what we need to really focus on, especially if we want to reduce our vulnerability to negative thoughts, is learning how to hear what our mind body mm-hmm. are telling us. We need to learn the language of what the signals mean for us. Mm-hmm. And if we can't hear it, it's like ignoring our child when they have a need. When they're crying because their diaper needs to be changed. We know what the difference of the cry. I know the difference between my dog's bark if he needs to go number 1 or number 2. Yeah. We listen that intently there, right. But how are we listening that intently to ourselves? Yeah. Because that is happening inside of all of us. Our body's telling us exactly what we need to know. But are we listening? Are we effectively listening? Are we listening through the right filter?
Yeah. Because
physical pain doesn't necessarily mean we need a pill. Physical pain may be telling you need to do some core work. Your core strength needs to be stronger so that you're not having that physical pain. And there's all different kinds of things. It could be telling you that there's something systemically going on.
But it's telling you something.
But it's telling you something, and you have to learn how to hear it. And sometimes, I mean, I've been on a, just a journey for the last year of listening to my body in a different way, because I've been removing prescription medication, because I've determined that their benefit did not outweigh the side effects and the other issues. So, I've been on this journey so that I can listen to my body. So I know exactly what was in that dessert that triggered all of that inflammation. And it's something that it was the refined sugars and the coconut.
Yeah.
And people would be like, the coconut. Yeah. And actually there was coconut in two different elements of my meal. It was in my risotto. It was coconut risotto. And then there was coconut on my dessert, and coconut is highly inflammatory to me. But I wanted it. And I made a deal with myself that I was having it. I actually thought about it for a really long time, but the whole meal, right? And so I knew what I was setting myself up for. But anyway, so we have to learn how to hear different things. And it's a process, and we can't be in a hurry. We cannot be in a hurry, because I'm having to learn how to work with a body that has, autoimmune. So it tends to attack itself. And I know that I can moderate that with the foods that I put into my body. But I also know that I don't have to be so restrictive all the time. I just have to be careful to walk that fine line of not eating things that will trigger those physical responses. So, generally it's right around that 15%. Like I can, 1 or 2 days, I can kind of skirt by, but 5-6 days a week, I need to be very mindful. Or I could end up in a flare up, and I don't want to be there, but I've been working really hard to know my thresholds and that does mean finding alternatives to some of those more habitual things that I would like to eat, like ice cream or other items, and finding ways that I can satiate myself mentally and emotionally and physically with what I'm utilizing as food. So what do my treats look like? They're made out of, for the most part, I make them with all natural organic ingredients, and and other times, it's a full-on chef-made cake.
Well, and for me, because I have the obsessive compulsive food disorder, I have to really have a talk with myself when I think that I can bring desserts into the house. Like, there are certain foods, if I bring them in, I cannot control myself.
Right.
And there are other foods I can bring in and I can have one cookie. And then there are other times with those cookies that I could have had one, depending upon how vulnerable I am. I can't just have one or two. So for me, treats are just a really interesting food, an interesting food group. So what I wind up doing is I will get a good treat, and then I'll cut it into pieces so that I immediately say, okay, well, I'll just start with the one piece, and then try to not go back for all the rest at once. And then if I do, I just say, okay, I'm not ready for that. I'm not. I'm vulnerable to my lack of self-control. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that we've talked a lot about vulnerability with our things that we do to ourselves, right? Within our own self. But there's a lot of vulnerability that we feel when other people spew. Is that the word? What's the word? When what?
You?
Spew. Yes. Spew their negative emotions at us. Right.
Sure.
That's a whole nother topic. And so I just wanted to share that one of my biggest lessons in life was learning. I have a lot of experience with being humiliated in public. My whole journey set me up for that. And I had to, and in writing Feast and Famine, one of the things that I learned is that no one can judge me unless I give them the title of judge. And that was like the most profound thing I learned in writing the book, that when people are spewing, I got the word right, their negative emotions about me or not about me, or just they're coming at me, I've learned that I don't have to take them personally. And not having to take them personally has allowed me to maintain my recovery. Because I'm just look at them and I'll be like, okay, thank you for sharing that. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in. I always say I'm either like, thank you or screw you, right? Like when it depends on what mood I'm in, right? How I respond, but it's never about, it's that they cannot judge me because they're usually, most often when people are spewing negative emotions at you, it's all about stuff in their own life. It's always 100%. About them.
100%. And that's where we do the work on our external locus of control, right? So we have that. If we allow the words of another person to penetrate us to the level that it has the power to manipulate how we think, feel in any given moment or about ourselves, then we're truly in that external locus of control position. And we really want to get into that internal, because their words are their perception. That's their perspective. That's how they think, feel, believe. And it really has nothing to do with us, even though they're projecting it at us. It's their interpretation. And so, generally I like to say, when I get into that type of a situation, is either, wow, did you mean for that to be so hurtful because it's penetrating me as such? Or, wow, I really would like to know more about how you came to that perspective or perception of me, because it's not how I see myself at all, nor is it how I want to be experienced by others. So can we talk about that further? I'd really like to know how you arrived at that, because that's not at all how I want to come across. And now I'm stepping into the stance of a learner instead of a stance of a judger. They're in the stance of a judger, but I'm inviting them to a space of inquiry where we can have a conversation. But ultimately, I've shifted into a space where it's, more of, sure, I want to be received by people the way that I want to see myself. However, I have no control over how people receive me or perceive me. All I can do is show up the best way I can. And so it's not that I don't care. It's not that I don't care when somebody has a negative, opinion or thought of me. But it doesn't mean that I feel like I need to make any kinds of adjustments in myself. I may need to make adjustments in how I present to them, because there's what I call a language gap or a barrier. Some reason or another, they're not, I'm not speaking the right language to them.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And, when I've been in situations like that, one of the things that I say is, well, I'm really sorry that you feel that way. Is there something I can do to help you or help the situation?
Yes.
And it kind of really diffuses it, because they're not actually looking for help at that moment. Right. But I'm willing to give it, because the person is obviously upset. And, a lot of times I say, is there something I can do to help fix this or help you feel better?
Yeah.
I'm kind of serious. They don't normally know that, because they're so caught up in the emotion. But I think it's a good way for people to diffuse the situation.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up. And as always, everybody's going to hear me say this wonderful line of, well, we're going to have you back so that we can continue the conversation,
Sure.
because as hard as I try to get this to 35 minutes, to not exceed what everybody, I know 45 minutes is a big ask for all of y'all to tune in, and we do want to thank you. Hopefully it just sucked you in like it sucked us in, and you've been listening to all of it, and you've got a good amount of information, support, guidance, or just even ideas of what you can do to improve your life going forward. However, Robin and I must sign off now because we both have things we must move on to. So again, Robin, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you being here. Please don't log off just yet. I will stop the live and the recording and say goodbye to you off screen. But again, thank you so much for bringing all of your wisdom, all of your compassion, care, empathy, guidance. I could, list forever, but I really appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And don't forget, drop your information down in the comments so that everybody can find you, follow you, get your books, get her books, guys. Learn something. And anyway, just, make sure you put that in there so everybody can find you. It makes it easier on me so they don't have to reach out to me. And anyway, just do it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks again. Bye, everybody. I'll see you next week.